Hi, welcome to Apple This Week. I'm Mark Gurman,
And I'm Alex Webb. Good morning.
and we're coming to you live on the terminal, on the web, Facebook, Twitter, and we have a great show planned for today. We're going to be talking about our big story on the Apple digital glasses. But before we get to that, there was an election last week, right?
I also heard this. There was something of an election in the US, yes.
That's right. So what does that mean for Apple and other technology companies? Donald Trump, the president-elect, has said a lot about Apple, plans to move manufacturing back to the U.S.
Or hopes to, yeah.
Hopes
I mean,
to.
so tech stocks took a little bit of a hit immediately after the election. They've recovered a little bit since then. But Apple was one of those that was heavily impacted. A lot of Trump's electoral platform was targeting globalization as a reason why jobs have been taken away from the US. And of course, as we know, Apple is a heavily globalized company. If you look at your iPhone on the back, it says designed by Apple in California, assembled in China. Now, their supply chain extends to the deepest corners of the globe. Our colleague today had a great story about how they source gold from Colombia, for example. They might have chips, movement chips made in Germany and various other places around the world. So Apple is partially dependent upon the free flow of trade, tariffs, but not prohibitive tariffs, which allow them then to move production around, source supplies globally, and then export their products to the target markets. And any threat to that, of course, poses a risk to their profitability.
Right, and to be fair, they do a little bit in the U.S. already, right? They had the Mac Pro a few years ago. They developed in Texas some processors.
Well, I think the key element here is, of course, Apple does very little, pretty much no manufacturing of its own. It's
Right.
largely contracted out to contract manufacturers.
Yep.
These are largely Asian companies. There's Flex, which is an American company based here in the Bay Area, which was manufacturing the Mac Pro in Texas, as you said.
Yep.
But it's more Foxconn and Pegatron, Asian companies, which of course they're not prohibited from building factories in the US,
Right.
but they are largely at the moment in China.
Right.
And even if they were to come to the US, there is a question mark about how many jobs they would actually create, because now any new factory that is constructed is very heavily automated. You have if you go to a chip factory, there are a few people on the production line, not hundreds, not thousands, as there might have been in Detroit in the days of yore.
Right, and the thing in China is that there's a whole education system built around the preparation to build these devices. It takes years. I doubt we'll see a significant change, certainly in these next 4 to 8 years.
And does America want to become a manufacturing economy again? That's a very different question. There is also some implications about tax. Trump has proposed, so at the moment, if you have tax kept offshore, Apple has about $216 billion kept outside the US. And that's largely because if you want to repatriate that money, bring it back to the States, you've got to pay a 35% tax rate. That's a big chunk of money, particularly when you have that much offshore. Trump has proposed cutting that to 10%. His rationale is partially the money that the tax income that the US will get, they can dedicate towards infrastructure projects. But also, he thinks this money will then go towards expanding production facilities in the US. There's a big question mark about this. In 2004, when there was a tax holiday, this didn't really happen. The largest part of the money seems to have gone towards stock buybacks. And Apple hasn't had a problem getting money in the US in recent years. The money that it has raised through debt has been quite easy to get, and that money has gone towards buybacks, dividends, sending the money back to shareholders.
Right. So we'll see what ends up happening, but until then, let's talk about something more exciting, right?
Right, so we had the story on Monday about Apple exploring some glasses, smart glasses, possibly similar to Google Glass. Maybe you can lay out kind of exactly what we reported, what key elements.
Yeah, before that, please feel free to send in questions about the prior topic and whatever we talk about now. So, as Alex said, we reported that Apple is working on a pair of digital glasses. This would be similar to Google Glass. It would have a small display in the lenses, and it would be able to present you information such as applications, notifications, alerts, messages, etc., and be able to basically show you if you have the notifications on your wrist, sort of like an Apple Watch, same style, but to the eye itself, which is an interesting place to present information. This is still in the evaluation, early development stage, early testing stage. At the earliest, it would be released or announced in 2018, and we'll have to see if they end up doing it. But one of the big questions over the course of the reporting is the privacy and camera situation, right? Google Glass flopped because of partly because of having a camera on the front. What do you think about that?
I mean, there were concerns clearly for users. I don't know about you personally, but when I saw some with Google Glass, there was always a half second where I think, wait, is that thing recording me? Oh no,
Right.
there's no light on. So there's a slight, moment of hesitation happening there. Apple, of course, prides itself on its approach to privacy and not wanting to overstep that mark. So one has to wonder whether Apple would build a camera into such a wearable optics, and also that then poses limitations on the extent to which it could really be considered augmented reality, for example. I mean, augmented reality is a broad spectrum. How would this compare to something like Microsoft HoloLens, for example?
Right. So there's two versions of this reality. There's augmented reality and virtual reality. Virtual reality is you sort of step into an environment and you're fully enclosed in the virtualness of it. The augmented reality is sort of a mixture. It's you see what you see, but you can also throw like a map overlay on top of it and some other fun things.
But of course, that's limited. If you don't have a camera, it's hard to see what you're overlaying.
Yeah, hardly
You could
possible.
just have information in your field of vision, which is still a very basic form of augmented reality. It is augmenting your reality, but Microsoft HoloLens is full augmented reality,
Yep.
or fuller augmented reality. It's taking information from around you and then imposing information upon
And the
it.
thing with HoloLens, it's not a device that you can wear out and about.
Well, not that you'd want to.
Though not you want to, because it's fully enclosed, sort of look like a robot. But with the Apple approach, it's very likely that they want something that blends into the environment, blends in like a normal pair of glasses, basically akin to the Apple Watch, for the most part, looking like a standard watch. It doesn't look like a whole,
This
facility
actually,
on your arm.
we have a
Yeah.
question on this actually.
Sure.
Do we have any idea what they might look like? Now, clearly, we're quite a long way out from seeing the products, so it's hard to know for certain. But I think it seems perhaps the effort would be to make them look like normal glasses, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. There's very high chance that if Apple does indeed go this route, if it's not going to just be one variation, just like with the Apple Watch, where you can swap out from dozens of bands, change watch faces, get different casing colors. It's highly likely, based on previous Apple approach, that they would have several different versions that you can customize at several different price points.
I think there's another question here. Is the battery technology good enough to support glasses? I think this is particularly interesting when you look at Google Glass, because it was actually quite clunky. It wasn't
Yeah.
an elegant look. And that seems to be one of the major hurdles, one imagines.
Right. I mean, it all depends on if the technology is ready. A lot of what Apple does is developed years before the technology is ready, and they can only put it out there. Because there's a difference between being able to prototype something, test something internally, produce them in small quantities. But when we're talking about Apple here, we're talking about millions of units. And in the case of the iPhone, we're talking about hundreds of millions of units. Apple has over 1 billion users of its current generation or more recent products. So waiting for the technology to get to that point where it could be made in quantities for over tens of millions of people, that's a whole other story.
And I mean, battery technology right now is particularly sensitive given the Samsung scenario. It's not something you want to rush and cram into a very small, build.
Right, and having a faulty battery in your hand or plugged into your car is very different than having one on your face. Don't mean to joke about it, but it's very important after the Samsung issues for companies to take even greater care, because as a technology company, you never know if you're going to be the one who's next with a big problem.
We have a question here, will this be VR or something different? I think we addressed this briefly just now, but there is, a very clear difference between VR and augmented reality. Virtual reality subsumes you, encloses you in a virtual, one assumes 3D world.
Yep.
And you are completely disconnected from the real world around you. Augmented reality brings information, digital content into your field of vision.
Right, and Tim Cook has been surprisingly open about this, comparing VR to AR. What does he think?
I mean, Tim Cook has been a lot more bullish on AR than he
Right.
has on VR. I think there are clear reasons for this, because certainly for Google as well, it's very clear that there's more advantages to it, because if you can put something in someone's field of vision, then you can push them towards services. And if you can get service revenue out of it, Apple's App Store is now expanding on that stuff very heavily as well. One assumes that it's a more compelling business case.
Could you imagine a pair of glasses with a Apple App Store on it? Maybe I don't know, Glass OS with the Glass OS App Store.
Well, they've got, they have Mac OS, iOS,
Watch OS,
Watch OS.
yeah.
I assume it would be the same. But I mean, how would you compare then I mean, at this stage, it's quite speculative. What exactly will be in it? All we know about is that this hardware is in development. But how might you compare Watch OS with, what would be displayed in your glasses?
Right. I mean, the thing with Watch OS is it's a stripped down version of iOS, and it's still very touch enabled. You can't really touch what you see in your field of vision unless it has some sort of cameras where but that seems far ways off to be able to get sensors. So we're not expecting that, and we certainly haven't reported that. But in terms of maybe voice activated or a touch panel on the side, we'll have to see. There's lots of different ways they could do this.
And there's a question here, what would Apple need to do to make sure these are successful? And I think price point, this is why stuff like, really advanced technology in your field of vision seems less likely, because
Right.
you need to do that sort of stuff. You're talking about price point above $1,000
Right.
to be able, and if, Apple probably, one imagines, would want to bring it below $1,000 in order to make it a widespread consumer
It'll
product.
be really interesting to see if there's a play here with prescription lenses with insurance companies covering some of the cost of the glasses, because I know you had a story on how insurance companies are helping to fund the Apple Watch for some companies and employers and employees. So that would be an interesting direction, but probably not something from the get-go.
But also, crucially, that would be something which would really help them get into sales channels.
Oh, yeah,
if
absolutely.
most people going into a shop, or an optician's, if there's an option of buying an Apple Glass type product or whatever it's called, then that would be, a hugely positive way for them to expand their
That would
reach.
that would be interesting, because it's not like you can go into a watch store and buy an Apple Watch. Like if you go into like a store that sells Rolexes and Cartiers and all those, you don't see an Apple Watch there. Maybe in the future, it would be interesting to see if Apple wants to place itself in the sunglass huts of the world.
Well, I think that also is depending on what the competition come up with.
Right,
There's a
right.
company called Luxottica, an Italian company. They control about 40% of the US eyewear market. They own Sunglass Hut, LensCrafters, Ray-Ban, Oakley, any number, and they also make a lot of glasses for designer brands as well. And so, the willingness of companies like that to let Apple sell their stuff in their stores would be perhaps a big question worth asking. They were helping Google for a little bit when Google Glass seemed to be a very active project, and one wonders whether Google's motivation in doing that was, hey, maybe let us get into your stores as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see which business model Apple takes here. If they just make the technology and the lenses and they license it out to different makers like Luxottica, Ray-Ban, Prada, whatever, Ferragamo. But I feel like the Apple approach is typically to do the whole kit themselves.
Right, but if we're talking about what the technology actually is, it's on the one hand, Apple prides itself upon design. But if you look at the Apple Watch, they do have the Hermes brand and stuff.
Right,
So,
and the Nike one.
and
so.
they do have a lot. The way that the Apple Watch conversation has changed, it's moved more towards being a fitness and health product, and away slightly from being a designer product, a luxury product. But they've still got a lot of these luxury people working for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine the first generation or so of these glasses, if they do indeed hit the market, would probably be all Apple. But down the road, it would make a ton of sense for them to partner with a big fashion house in order to drive sales and marketing and all that.
So we've got some more questions coming in. So far, the most basic but also most widespread version of augmented reality that we've seen has been Pokemon Go. What kind of features would you like to see in in augmented reality, however basic, however advanced, in your vision?
Right. I mean, at the most basic level, being able to just walk around and see in your field of view that, hey, your dad's calling you, your friend's calling you, maybe a FaceTime call, where if it has an external camera, you can show them what's going on, but you can see them. That would be cool. You're walking around, and to your point about services, and Apple has patents for this, you could be looking around, you want to know where the nearest cafe is, or 7-Eleven, where depending on where you turn your head, you can see in your field of view which direction. You can just start walking there, maps directions, messages. There's so many cool applications for AR that sound so basic, but are also probably going to be the most useful if Apple does indeed go this route.
And for retailers as well, this is dependent upon the willingness of Apple to share this kind of data. But if you're walking down a high street, Christmas time, for example, and everybody has their extravagant shop windows, and you can see which shop windows are getting the most attention because you can see which are being looked at more than others. That really helps companies with their marketing and working out how to target customers effectively.
It'd be interesting to see if Apple did that because, you know, they're all against this Google approach of making the consumer the product. But if they did it in a way with this new differential privacy system where they don't really attach it to anyone in particular, it could be cool and useful.
We've got one more question here. Of course, glasses came out last week, Snapchat. And
Yes.
question, how might they differ? How might they compare to what Snapchat is doing?
Well, Snapchat's glasses, they're very cool, but it's a gimmick, and Evan Spiegel really admitted this himself, I believe, that it's something you buy as a gift, a Christmas gift, a toy. They're under $200. They're basically just for taking Snapchat video and pictures, no augmented reality, no virtual reality.
There's no display,
Right.
basically.
There's nothing beyond
Sort of a
snapping
novelty
pictures
in
and
some
videos.
ways.
Exactly. A novelty is what I would put it at. But isn't that a really cool marketing scheme for the Snap brand?
And I mean, the thing is as well, they're sunglasses, so wearing them indoors, I don't know what you think about people who wear sunglasses indoors, but I would
Right.
be a little bit
But
scared.
everyone's going wild for them, and I think that's really going to help.
I certainly would like to try them.
Yeah, I would love to too. And for it, the way they're marketing these, throwing these down in like these snap boxes on Venice Beach, where you could just slide your card in and get it like a vending machine. It's a really cool marketing ploy at the very least.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think we're going to wrap up now. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope to see you the same time next week. Do follow Bloomberg's technology team on Twitter. We're just @technology. And wish you all a lovely afternoon and lovely evening, depending on where you are.
Thanks all.